Meditation is good for you, and you should be doing it more often, but you already knew that. Meditation is already one of the most overhyped, overmarketed, and oversold products in human history. And in this mad dash to market meditation for the modern age, I think that some of its most important features have been lost and forgotten. Instead of slowly being inducted into a community and taught how to meditate by an elder, you are now expected to learn how to do it online, alone in your bedroom. No one goes in with a specific goal. You're taught that if you try meditation for long enough, eventually something will magically change and you'll suddenly begin being happy. And after a few weeks, when your vague and unachievable goals haven't been met, meditation gets added to the list of things you tried once and never looked back to. And if that describes you, you are precisely the person I'm making this video for. Because meditation can be life-changing, but only if you understand its original purpose and go in with the right, specific goals. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about the most underrated benefit of meditation and how you can start to achieve it. Part 1. How the human mind works. All human life starts off cradled in the womb, free from any sort of predator and fed everything you could ever need through the umbilical cord. Ah, this is nice, you say to yourself as you are ripped into the cold light of the world and forced to fend for yourself. Someone puts a fucking hoe into your hand and you're told that if you don't make ends meet, you will fucking die. Thus is the fundamental condition of the human body. You need things or you will die, and so evolution came up with a clever device to get them: desires. Your body requires things like food, sleep, and allies in order to survive, and so it evolved feelings like hunger, tiredness, and loneliness to motivate you to get those things. But of course, the human survival strategy is much more complicated than just collecting arbitrary items. We have to perform complex tasks, like strategizing for the hunt, or planning our immigration based on the weather, or crafting complicated tools, or forming elaborate social hierarchies. Therefore, beneath the layer of simple emotions that allow us to complete day-to-day tasks, we have a number of more complex emotions that allow us to plan our life over the long term. Because the more complex a need, the more complex an emotion is required to motivate it. One need that only humans have is the ability to organize ourselves into specific roles that help out our community. Other pack animals, like wolves, all more or less do the same thing. If you're a wolf, your job in the pack is to run after prey and bite it in the neck. Simple. But with humans, we need people who can perform hyper-specialized tasks. Because a tribe composed of a mixture of experts in different specialities is able to weather a more diverse array of storms. Therefore, humans feel a need for something like purpose, this vague feeling that there's something out there in the world that was made for just you, and that it's your job to go on an adventure and find what it is about yourself that's special so that you can start fulfilling this role. Another complex need humans have is the need for innovation. Tribes who only ever do the same thing for generations on end will eventually die out. Therefore, there's an advantage to feeling like this place we live in isn't quite right, that somewhere out there in the great wide somewhere, we could be doing something better. Or in other words, our desire to find meaning in the universe, to connect with something bigger than ourselves, is really no different from our smaller needs for food. The only difference is that the more complex a need is, the more complex the motivator applying to it has to be. Now, you may have noticed that these desires for authenticity and purpose and adventure tend to be the topics of the first songs in Disney movies. Because needing something deep, going on a spiritual quest to find it, overcoming challenges, and returning with your consciousness changed is the basis for all human storytelling. But while Joseph Campbell's hero's journey may work for films, you're not a fictional character. You're not in a movie. You're a real human living a life, and thus this journey can't be applied exactly to you. Neo felt that something was wrong. He desired for change, and then he met Morpheus, who gave him a single pill which magically gives him all the answers. But I hate to break it to you, your journey isn't going to be that simple. There will not be one occasion for you to instantly learn the answer to every question you have. You're going to have to go on your own winding and messy and complex journey that won't always be satisfying. And so instead of the hero's journey, you're left with a samskar. Samskar is an old Hindi word that means something like a pent-up ball of emotions. And so similarly, if you've got an emotional samskar, you may have a bunch of things that are wrong with your life that tangle up, and then you feel a bunch of pains, but you don't know what problem is causing what pain. You can't dig yourself out of a hole if the problem that got you in there is too complicated for you to even begin addressing it. So if humans can have these painful emotions, why don't we just fix them? Well, let me start by asking you a question. What is the rule you would like to live your life by? If you're smart, you probably said something like, I want to live my life in accordance with the highest good I can possibly conceive of. Sure, you can live your life following popularity or money as your ultimate ideal, but true virtue comes along from living a life that isn't just strong and successful, but kind and moral at the same time. A life in which we always work as hard as we can, and we're always as honest as we can, and we're always as kind as we can, all at the same time. And so if we know that this is the answer, how come this ideal is so difficult to strive for? Because when you have needs, your mind is incapable of thinking long term, and as we've discussed, if you're a human, you're gonna have a lot of fucking needs. When an animal is starving, instead of looking for the most long-term filling meal possible, it will instead start to crave sugar, because it's looking for any source of energy that'll help it stay alive right now. And this principle, that desperate people look for things to satiate them right now, also applies to our social and spiritual lives. When people are desperate and lonely, instead of this motivating them towards wholesome community events when they can make friends, they tend to find more destructive outlets like attention-seeking and short-term sexual relationships. When a person is viciously insecure and feels not good enough, instead of turning to a life of vigorous self-improvement to become the person they want to be, they tend to spend money, brag on social media, and act cruelly towards others to put them down. Or in other words, the human brain was designed so moronically that when we are most desperate and needy, instead of turning to long-term solutions, we look to short-term solutions which actually make things worse. And it is precisely this process which meditation is good at interrupting. So, now that we've given an accurate and detailed account of how negative thoughts and behaviors spawn and refuse to leave our brains, let's talk about how meditation can actually solve this problem. The simple answer to this question is that by using introspection, you can start to see that the entire system that these flaws were built upon was simply an illusion. And once you truly grasp and learn to see through this illusion, you can stop the negative behaviors it creates from having control over your mind. As we've discussed, the brain creates complex desires to motivate you towards certain behaviors. These desires then get tangled up into complex emotional balls, and in an effort to fix this, our brain pushes us towards coping behaviors that are harmful in the long term. So the simple answer is, why should we be listening to our brains? The answer to this is that you have some kind of fallacy in your brain, some belief that if a thought comes from you, that means it's your opinion and then thus worth listening to. And I can actually prove this with a very simple demonstration. Close your eyes as you're listening to this video and listen to the words coming out of my mouth. My words are existing in your consciousness. You are experiencing my words, but you're not the one who created them. You are nothing more than a passive observer to my words. You can hear them and then choose to either take them or leave them. Therefore, if you were to hear me say something that was against your values, such as "you're not good enough," you would simply not believe me. However, if we were to repeat this experiment using words in your own head, we wouldn't get the same results. While watching this video, try to observe the thoughts appearing in your head. Maybe you're having a thought that this video is interesting and you should keep watching, or maybe you think this video is boring and you should stop watching. Maybe your attention is getting distracted by something in your room. Maybe you're going to have a memory of something you need to do tonight. When you observe one of these thoughts, such as "I should click off this video," there's a decent chance that you're going to do what it says. And, as we've mentioned, if one of these thoughts happens to be negative, for example, if you have the thought that there's something wrong with your life, then when you have that thought, you're also going to believe it. Or in other words, when I make words appear in your head, you can choose whether or not to believe me, but when thoughts appear in your own head spawning from yourself, they have this privileged view where, by virtue of the fact that you're the one that thought it, you view this as somehow being your opinion. But this viewpoint is exactly the illusion that you need to see through, because the reality is that you are not the author of your thoughts. Your consciousness is the observer of your thoughts. When you are sat around, thoughts may appear in your head, but you did not choose to have these thoughts. But if you're stuck in this illusion that every thought in your head belongs to you, then of course they're going to control you. A very popular analogy that's used to get across this point is the idea of cars on the road. Thoughts can be a lot like cars. They can be chaotic and fast-moving, and they can take you places. If you are stuck inside of a thought, such as the thought that you need to fix something, that thought is going to take you somewhere. And given that thoughts can be negative, this means that humans are capable of taking themselves to some pretty dark places. And so in this analogy, the goal of meditation isn't to stop your thoughts, isn't to stop the cars, it's simply to take yourself from being inside one of these cars to placing yourself on the sidewalk. So that next time a negative thought happens, instead of being inside of that thought, instead of allowing it to take you somewhere, you can simply observe that you didn't choose to have this thought, it doesn't belong to you, and thus you don't have to listen to it. You can just watch it pass and then never follow it. And when you've learned to look past those thoughts, you want to know what you're left with? Choice. You can choose what you think about and what you do. You can choose to align yourself with your deepest values, what we talked about before, doing the best thing possible in every moment. Because when you train yourself to always stay focused on the maximum possible good, that's when you'll become the greatest version of yourself. But if all of this is getting a little bit too metaphorical and theoretical for your taste, let me give you some practical examples of how this has helped me. The other day, I was in the gym, and for whatever reason, the sets just weren't hitting right. The weights felt heavier than usual, and I felt like I just wasn't at my strongest. And this is when the thought arose that I wasn't very good, that I should give up and go home. And for a few seconds, I fell for the illusion. I believed that just because this thought was in my head meant I had to follow it, and I fantasized about leaving. And so I went to the side for a second and I closed my eyes. I asked myself where this thought was coming from, and I determined that it could be a mixture of my fatigue and maybe some past insecurities all mixing together, but that crucially this thought wasn't in line with my goals, that it didn't belong to me, and thus I should try and move past it. And so I closed my eyes and I observed the thought from what it was. I imagined whether or not I would believe this thought if someone else had told me it, and I determined that the answer was no. And in that moment, the thought no longer had control over me, and I was able to stay in the gym and finish my set. Whereas if I had never done this meditation training, maybe I would have fallen victim. Maybe I would have gone home, and maybe my workout could have suffered. Because the goal of this practice isn't to ignore or get rid of these feelings, it's simply to learn to have a better relationship to them. But that relationship doesn't come about magically. It's something that you have to train and practice at to become good at. And that process is exactly what meditation is. And so if you'd like to have this relationship with yourself, if you'd like to learn these skills, I'm going to end off here with some very practical advice about how you can get back onto meditation and stick with it. Step 1 is to form the habit using the minimum viable effort technique. Minimum viable effort is when you break down a task into its smallest form possible. So for meditation, this would be something like sitting down by yourself for 30 seconds. Then for a few days, you're going to set the habit that you're going to do this minimum viable effort. You're going to sit down for 30 seconds and no more. The reason for this is because 30 seconds is so easy, it's such a simple task that there's no way that even a procrastinator could say no to it. Don't push yourself too far, don't let your ego get away with you, don't say that this is too easy, do the task for a week straight and then the habit will be formed. And then from there, you can begin progressively overloading just like you would at the gym, giving yourself a minute, then 2 minutes, then 3 minutes of meditation until you're able to do something like 12 minutes. Keep your meditation as simple as possible. Just close your eyes and focus on your breath. This is the most important tip I can give you. When thoughts arise, do not think about not thinking about them. Don't do anything stupid like imagining your thoughts as objects and then putting them in a box. Don't imagine yourself hammering your thoughts to pieces. Do nothing more than acknowledge that the thought is there and then return to your breath. And if you ever get frustrated, keep in mind that failure is the point. If you want to increase how far you can run, you need to run until you get exhausted. If you want to increase how much strength you have, you need to lift until you can't lift anymore. This is called exercising till failure, because it's only when you're failing that you know that a task is difficult enough that you're actively improving. And so when you're meditating, what you should do is meditate until failure. Try and keep yourself focused for long enough that you no longer can. And then when you get to that point that you're failing, don't be frustrated with yourself. Be glad that you've reached this point, because now that you're challenging yourself, that's where the improvement starts. And if you really keep on this habit, if you get up to that point where you're meditating 10 minutes every single day, I promise you that you are going to become absolutely unstoppable and have such a positive relationship with yourself and your own thoughts. And so if you found any aspect of this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm a brand new channel and I'm really trying to grow right now. And if you want to engage with me further, I always answer my DMs on Instagram and Twitter, so contact me there.